Welcome to the Ambitious Introvert podcast, created especially for introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive entrepreneurs to help you build, grow, and scale a successful, sustainable business. I'm your host, Emma-Louise Parks, business and mindset coach for ambitious introverts. After 17 years working as an air traffic controller, the ultimate fast-paced, high-stimulus, extrovert-friendly role, my mission now is to show introverts that they too can create big results and success because of who they are, not in spite of it. I focus on introvert-friendly business and marketing strategy to help you switch overwhelm for clarity, confidence, and clients. Hello. Welcome to this week's episode of The Ambitious Introvert. I'm Emma-Louise. If you listened last week, you would have heard this croaky voice in the intro as well. I have been struggling a little bit after quite a sociable week, followed by a day at Wimbledon, which included lots of shouting. So I am rather husky at the moment. So I am going to keep these intros for these few weeks quite short, but I just wanted to introduce this week's fabulous guest, Dina Behrman. Dina is a PR strategist and publicity coach, and she helps coaches, consultants, and service providers to pitch and get featured in the press. Now, Dina and I were actually in a mastermind together back in 2022. She had been through that mastermind before. I don't very often connect with people that are quite nearby, so I reached out to her. We had a virtual coffee, and I've had the pleasure of meeting up with Dina in person as well and spending time with her in London. And she's amazing. She also supports my clients in the Quiet Power Mastermind. I invited her to be a guest expert in that. So all of that to say is it was really great to chat with her and find out more about how PR and publicity can really help us to grow our businesses as introverts without pushing us to do things that feel so far outside of our comfort zone that they exhaust us and drain us. So I'm going to save my voice and I'm going to let you enjoy this episode and Dina's wisdom all about PR. Oh, well, this is nice. Catching up with a friend and doing a podcast interview at the same time.
I know, it's a good combination.
It really is. So obviously I've introduced you. People have heard who you are in the intro, and I always wanted you on the podcast anyway, before we connected properly and became friends, because this is a really important topic and one that, as we were saying before we hit record, it can feel a little bit overwhelming and a little bit scary as an introvert if you think about PR, because you're literally going, look at me.
Yeah.
Put me in front of thousands upon thousands of people, which isn't always our natural habitat.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to dive into that, but I'd love you to share a little bit more about your business journey first and how you got into the online space.
Yeah. So I started my career as a journalist. I've always loved writing, and I think I've always had the sort of telling people stories has always appealed to me. And so I worked as a journalist for about 10 years. And I was at the point in my career, I was working as a commissioning editor for a big national newspaper supplement, and they had a round of redundancies. They told me they didn't have any more work for me. And so I had been doing a little bit of freelance journalism, and I basically at that point was like, okay, I need to make a go of it as a freelance journalist and kind of, do that as a full-time gig kind of thing. And so I started pitching my article ideas to different editors. And I was kind of on the other side of the fence because previously I'd had people pitching to me and I would be the one deciding, is this a good story? Should we run it? And then I was pitching to these different editors, and, sometimes you would send out a pitch and you just wouldn't get a reply. Or you'd send it out and they say thanks, but no thanks. And I quickly realized if I wanted to make a go of this as a full-time freelance career, I really needed to perfect my pitching skills. And so that's what I did. And it took trial and error, but I ended up being published in virtually every national UK newspaper and lots of magazines. And so I really, discovered what worked and what didn't when it came to pitching to editors. Now, after a couple of years of doing the freelance journalism, I decided to diversify, which I think a lot of people who are freelancing do. And so I initially started a side hustle, and I was doing PR and copywriting kind of on the side. And it was about 2015. I'd given birth to my eldest daughter and had a little bit of time off, and I'd sort of come back to work and had a bit of time to kind of reflect. And I just had this kind of renewed sense of purpose. And I really wanted to go all in on my business. I'd had enough of the journalism side of things. I'd done 10 years of that. And I was really focused on making my business my full-time thing. And I really liked the idea of helping people to learn how to get featured in the press. I felt like there was kind of a gap in the market for people that weren't quite ready to outsource their PR. And so that's what I started off doing, selling PR courses and programs. And that's how my business has evolved over time to working with different coaches, consultants, service-based business owners to help them to pitch the press and get featured in the press. And I've done for you PR for different business owners over time where they've hired me as their kind of personal publicist. But a big part of my business has been helping people to learn how to actually pitch the press themselves. And so I've been able to take those skills that I cultivated when I was working as a journalist and help business owners to be able to use them and understand how the media works so that they can get features, so that they can get publicity for their business.
It's like the whole give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. They can take those skills and go and keep using them all the way through their business.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that not everyone's in that position to be able to hire someone to do the PR for them. And also, even if you know you want to outsource your PR further down the line, it really helps to understand how it works. So I've had clients in the past who would work with me to, learn about PR, and then maybe further down the line or as their business progresses, they're in that place where they can outsource it. But I think it just helps to have that understanding of how it all works and how to know that you're getting the results that you want with it.
So much of when I'm working with clients on their business model, especially the more done-for-you providers like designers or photographers or copywriters, this is such an important element because there's a stage that most people cannot outsource those. They're big investments. So people can't necessarily start a business one day and pay £5,000 or dollars for a website or website copy. And there's always so important, like you say, to have that space that serves and is accessible and helps people to get started and grasp that understanding. But so many times those people then come back to clients because their business has evolved, 6 months, 12 months later, it can go really fast. And they're like, right now I'm ready to outsource it. But they've learned the skill enough to get them going, but they now trust you because they've taken your course and they know that what you do is solid.
Yeah. I also think you as a service provider, you get to a certain point, like I was being hired by different kind of coaches and then getting word of mouth referrals. And so I ended up being hired by quite a few sort of industry leaders to do their PR for them, that you get to a point where you're booked out. Like I was fully booked and I was then having to hire, like I was hiring PR freelancers to support me because there was only so many hours in the day to serve the clients. And unless you want to go down that agency model, you get to the point where your hours are capped, and then creating PR programs where I could serve a lot of people at the same time just made sense because, you get to the point where you're capped on the hours that you have. And I think a lot of people, when they're starting out and they're doing like some, service providers, you take that decision whether you're going to go down the agency route and kind of grow your business that way, or if you're going to leverage your time and have kind of the group programs and the courses and things.
Which is so important for introverts, which is very relevant to today's conversation because that, when you were saying, oh, I got maxed out and suddenly I've got no more hours in the day. And actually, not everyone starts their business just to create a ton of revenue. A lot of people, and I would say the majority of my clients, they want it to be a lifestyle business. Yes, they want revenue and, they're more than happy to take that, but it not at the expense of creating a lifestyle that they want, especially if they've got a family or, they've burnt out in corporate and they're like, hey, I don't want to be hustling for 60 hours a week on my own business. Yeah. So that having those options, I think, is really important, like you say, to make that decision early days.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that happened with my business when I first started out is that I kind of didn't really know who my ideal client was, and I didn't have like boundaries in place. And so when I very first started out, I was kind of working with anyone and everyone and taking on any bit of work that came my way. And actually, it was when I learned to start getting visible myself and put myself out there and really kind of own my expert status. I worked with this business coach and she used to say, Dina, you just need to own it. You just need to own it. That was like constantly what came up. And actually, I realized that I was helping people to get visible and get out there, and I wasn't doing it myself. And I was kind of getting to the point where I was basically overworked and underpaid because I was like working with all these clients, not really charging enough, but I wasn't putting myself out there. I wasn't really like claiming my expert status and putting myself out there as an expert, and I wasn't getting visible enough. And so when I started being proactive about doing that, because I had this coach, she said, like, what tools do you have at your disposal that you're not using? And it was like this light bulb moment of, you know, I'm helping other people to get visible and I'm not doing it myself. And it seems so obvious, but I think a lot of us are good at helping other people to do the things. And we don't necessarily look at our own businesses and look at what we should be doing for ourselves. And I started actually, first of all, having that mindset shift of like, I am an expert and I know my stuff. And then also proactively pitching to the press. And I got featured in places like Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine and, you know, got some of these sort of as seen in logos that I could then use on my website. And that was a big change for me. And that helped me to really take my business to the next level and, you know, start being recognized by different sort of people in the industry, start being hired by more people, having clients in all different countries around the world, that kind of thing.
I love that you touched on that, because on a slight side note, this, you know, what tools do you have at your disposal that you're not using? I think that's a great question. And for me, the least obvious thing for me to do is randomly reach out and talk to strangers, because that's just not where I'm at. But we obviously connected in a mastermind, and in that mastermind, there were like 4 or 5 people that I thought, oh, I really like them. You know, I really like their energy. I feel quite drawn to them, and reached out and said, hey, would you just like to have a virtual coffee? And that's outside of my comfort zone, not from any fear of judgment or anything like. It's just, you know, not how I would generally choose to spend my time. But I know it's really good for my business and it's really good for my network. And as I said in the intro, you know, we all managed to meet up in London, and it was randomly, you know, the same people that I'd reached out to, and we've stayed connected, and we've been able to support each other and connect each other with people and things. And, you know, both yourself and Mickey and Rachel, I think, on the call, as soon as we chatted, they went, oh, I think I'm your ideal client.
Yes.
So that just having that recognition of personal outreach and personal connection as well. And like you say, you grew it really quickly because people were referring you, which is great. So just want to say that so people don't think, oh my gosh, I've got to do all this marketing, all this PR and things. I think it's having that balance between knowing what works for you and getting out there and also using the other things that are available.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so glad that you did reach out, but also it's like you can do stuff that stretches you when it comes to PR and getting visible, but isn't completely at odds with your personality and what you like to do. And so if I have clients and it doesn't make sense for them to, you know, want to, I don't know, go on TV and do things like that, if that doesn't fit with their personality or with their kind of schedules, then there's so many other things they can do. They can write guest articles and guest blog posts and submit them. And maybe that's something they do in the evening when their kids are in bed, or they're not very confident with their writing. They can go and be interviewed on podcasts because they find it easier to talk than they do to write. And so you get to do it in the way that actually feels aligned and feels good to you. And I think, it's like that balance between doing stuff that's maybe out of your comfort zone and reaching out to podcast hosts or whatever it is, but just being true to yourself and doing stuff that feels good.
So true. And trust in that, trusting in yourself as you do it. So
yeah.
What are some of the things that come up for your clients, say that are newer to PR, maybe they're newer for business and more introverted? What are some of the mindset issues, challenges, thoughts that creep in around, publicity in general?
So many. So many.
Dina's like, how long's your episode?
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like the same sort of things come up. And it's looking at those beliefs and thinking, is this ultimately true? And so things like PR's not going to work for me. It's for other people. It's not for me. You have to be really well known to be featured in the press. You have to have a really big following to be featured in the press. And none of that's true at all. And I work with clients that don't have a following. They're not well known, thinking that, well, there's other people out there doing what I do who are more experienced than me. So who am I to get featured or be interviewed or whatever? And so all of those things, and just the whole general, the little old me syndrome, who am I to be doing this? Yeah, everything around it's for other people, not for me type of thing. And the thing is that journalists are in need of experts to feature. They're in need of story ideas. They're in need of people to share their expertise, to share their stories, people that can be a case study in a magazine article. So I think the thing that has helped a lot of my clients is having that understanding that journalists are actively looking for people like them to feature. And so it's not a case of, well, I need to somehow persuade this journalist that I'm good enough to be featured so I can convince them to write about me. It's actually thinking of it as a two-way thing where you get to share amazing value with the journalist by sharing your story that's going to be really inspiring and sharing your expertise that's going to be really educational. And then in return, they will promote you and your business for free. And it's a really kind of energetic exchange. And it's a two-way thing and it's a win-win for both sides. The journalist, you're helping them out. You're making their lives easier. You're giving them really great quotes or really great story or whatever it is. And then they will promote your business for free. And you get to leverage someone else's platform. So you get to leverage that podcast and all of their loyal listeners or that blog and all the people that are already reading it. And I think knowing that has been really helpful to a lot of my clients because they haven't really thought about it that way before.
I love that you've said that because this has come up with my clients so often when they begin pitching to podcasts in particular. And as a podcast host, I can honestly say nothing brings me more joy than a thoughtful, relevant pitch from an amazing potential guest, because that is doing me a favor, as you say.
Yeah,
and this is what I tried to say to clients. I'm like, you're not imposing on this person or annoying them. This person, if they have a podcast, which is purely guests, they need 52 guests a year. Yeah. And if you're delivering them, literally, I love it when I open an email and it's we found the Ambitious Introvert podcast. This is our client. She does A, B, and C. Here are some ideas of some topics that she could talk about. And some people even give me what the title could be. I mean, if you're giving me the title, I'm there because you've just saved me so much work in finding something. Yeah. And it's doing me a favor. So I think that is so important, like you say, with journalists as well. You're helping them out. You're giving them material to work with to do their job.
Yeah. And I think the other important thing you said is that it's thoughtful and relevant. So that's the other thing and where sometimes people go wrong is just thinking, I'm just going to it's a numbers game. I'm just going to send out a pitch to hundreds of people and just hope for the best. And that, if you're doing that, is where you're going wrong. And I see PR people doing this, just firing off press releases to hundreds of different publications and actually taking the time to be intentional and think this is the specific podcast or the specific magazine or whatever that I would really like to be in. And this is the specific thing that I could offer them and the value that I can give them, and being really well thought out with it and making sure that it's relevant, because there are people that will just pitch to places and their expertise is not relevant for that. You're not going to get featured everywhere if it's a podcast that's on a totally different topic, don't try and shoehorn yourself in. Like, find the ones that are the best fit for you. And then if you do that, you'll have success with it.
I've had numerous pitches that have started off with, I love your podcast. And, the highly sensitive in me goes, no, you don't. You've never listened to it. Before I even get any further, no, you don't.
Yeah.
And then they say, I'd love to share value to your audience about. And then it's something to do with, one of them was like asking for a pay rise and climbing the corporate ladder. It's like, it's an entrepreneur's podcast.
Yes.
So, there was something else as well, like weight loss. You think and I was like
random topics.
It's just not right. And there are some topics that I'm not saying that every guest has to be about business, because there are definitely other things that can play into business and affect us with that. But sometimes they're so off the mark that I'm like, no, you didn't listen. And it's not, I'm not going to feature that because it's not going to help my audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that happens with, like, when I worked as a journalist, we would get so many random pitches where they'd be like, would you like this article on like motoring? And it was for like a women's magazine that doesn't feature anything, on that topic. And it is that kind of basic kind of 101 of like research where you want to be featured. Like that would be the first step, is like do that research. But if you are thoughtful and you are intentional and you are relevant, and make sure that your pitch is relevant, you can have so much success getting featured in the press. It's open to everyone. Like every business owner, every listener of yours would be able to get amazing media coverage. It's not this thing that's just really exclusive or really elite. Like it is open to everyone.
And something you've mentioned a few times that I would love to touch on is story. And obviously coming from a journalistic point of view as well. And we love stories. Stories are emotional. We connect to them. Stories sell and all of that. Is there a way to pitch that is more story-based? I think many people are like, oh, I just need to say this is my business and this is what I do. And actually, when I have podcast pitches like that, I'm like, okay, I want a bit more, because I want to see how I can have a conversation with that person and bring out their story to be valuable to my audience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I'm kind of working with clients, the two main things that we focus on are story and expertise. Because if you're going to be interviewed or you're going to be featured, you're either going to be sharing your story or you're going to be sharing your expertise, or you're going to be sharing both of them. And so if you can focus on both of those things when you're pitching to the press, the story is the part, like you say, that really connects you to the journalist, podcast host, whatever. And it does create that like deeper level of emotional connection. And that is really important because, when I was working with a journalist, my boss would always say to me, like, what's the human interest angle? That's what journalists are looking for. And I think we're all humans and we want that human connection. So the story part gives you that. And then the expertise part is important as well, because if someone is going to be interviewed or featured or providing expert commentary, the journalist wants to sort of understand what it is that makes them an expert and why they would want to feature that particular person's insight or opinion or thoughts or advice. And so knowing how to kind of present yourself to a journalist or podcast host or radio show host or whatever as an expert is also really, really valuable. And so I think if you can focus on the story and on the expertise, then you're kind of giving the journalist everything that they would need to know that you would be the right person. And the storytelling you can use when you're pitching, but also you can use it often when you're being interviewed, when you're writing articles, even if you're doing like a top tips article or blog post, you could weave, even sometimes it's just a line of your story, you could put that into the introduction and it gives it context. And I think maybe that's what, like, part of what you were saying when you get a pitch, and it's great to see people's achievements and everything like that. But it's almost like, what's the context behind it? Like, why would it be, relevant that you're talking about tips for XYZ, or how did you get to be doing what you do? And it's that journey that we've all had, we've all as business owners been on some kind of journey that has led us to be where we are now. And that's kind of the thing that makes you stand out and makes you unique and gives you that extra element of interest that's really going to intrigue people when you're pitching them.
It's so true. And from a human point of view, I literally look at pitches and go, if I'm interested in learning more about this, then probably people listening are interested in learning more about this.
Yeah, exactly. At the very least, it makes it more interesting, because there are probably a million people out there that can do top tips for XYZ. And it's the thing that differentiates you. And like you say, it's like that human nature. We're all curious and we want to know the story behind the person.
I'm going to ask you something a bit left field now, because it just came to me as you were talking. Paid media.
Yes.
Now, I get at least 5 spam messages a day telling me how I can be in Forbes top 50 or something like that, but I have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Is this a legit thing? Is it a good thing? Does it, where has this come from all of a sudden?
That's a great question. Whenever I talk about PR, I'm talking about what we call earned media. So you're not paying for it. So we're talking about free editorial coverage. And that is the main focus of what I teach clients, is that. So I've had lots of clients featured in Forbes and we don't pay for it. They get featured because we pitch a really great angle and position them and everything like that. And so, I would always encourage people to go for free media coverage, because there is so much you can get for free. You're not, you don't need to pay. You can get, I always used to talk about how a lot of my clients get featured in places like the Daily Mail, which in the UK is just one of the sort of most well-known newspapers. And if you look at their advertising rate cards, if you were to pay for a double page spread in the Daily Mail, it's around the £80,000 mark. Whereas I've had clients that have had double page features in there and they've not had to pay anything. So it just gives you an idea of how valuable it is to get featured, and also that you can get it for free. So I would always focus on not paying. However, over the past couple of years, I have seen more and more of these, they call them pay to play media opportunities. And I have tested out a couple of opportunities where you can pay. I mean, I wouldn't pay for one of these things when they're coming into, I get them in my Instagram spam folder. Yes. And they're you can be in the top 20, coach it. And I'm no. No, I just think that if someone's coming into your spam folder and they don't even have a profile picture, they're probably just not the best person.
And then it goes, don't reply here, reply to the, because it's obviously just a bot sending loads of them.
And it's it just feels very dodgy. And all of those places that they're pitching, you can more often than not get in them for free. However, I have tried out, just because it's becoming more prevalent. And so what I have done with some clients in the past is put out a press release and then paid for it to be distributed across different websites that will actually publish the press release. This isn't the way that I would normally do PR. This isn't the way that I teach clients to do it. This was just something that I tested out as an additional way to get media coverage. The benefits of doing that you can get your press release published on sites where you then get to use those logos in your as seen in logos. So if you get the press release published on like Yahoo or something like that, you can then say you've been in Yahoo. It's really good for SEO if you do it correctly and have like backlinks and everything included. And it does give you some content you can share with your audience. However, the caveat to that is that only works if you write a really good press release and if you write it in the right style. So I would do it with my clients and I would be writing it for them. And we would, even the formatting is important. You want it to look like a really good article. You don't want it to look like a press release. So I would only do it if you can write it so that it looks like a really great profile piece. It's really well written, really well formatted, has photos, and then you do get some benefits. However, it's not going to lead to the same kind of results that you would get from organic free media coverage. My clients, when they get featured and they're not paying, they will get a lot more views. They've had, stories can go viral. You get other journalists reaching out to you. It leads to more inquiries, more followers, new clients, sales, all of that. And typically you're not probably going to get that from the paid media coverage. So sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but it's such an interesting topic because I think so many people now are seeing like pay to play opportunities and they're like, oh, is this the way that you get featured? And I would say like there's so much amazing media coverage you can get for free that just like go down the free route unless you want to try out a very something like distributing a press release on a distribution site could be something you might want to try.
Oh, don't apologize. It's fascinating. And I asked the question, so I was ready for the answer. But I think it is such a prevalent thing now that people are seeing more and more that it's worth just diving into whether it's worth it. So in summary, PR is introvert friendly and the free way works the best.
Yes, basically. I mean, I think in general as well, like when you're doing the free media coverage, you get better responses to it as well. Because if people see that it's paid, it's not as exciting for people, I suppose. When you get featured in the press and you share it with your audience and it's that kind of generally when it's that media, like people get so excited and it gets you in front of new people. So you're reaching new audiences, but it also engages your existing networks. And that's really valuable in itself.
I love it. I love it so much. Now, before we wrap up and I let you go, obviously I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Firstly being, and I'm intrigued as a writer and journalist yourself, which book would you recommend to anyone listening who's an introverted entrepreneur looking to grow their business?
I think You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero, because it's just like, it's the positive, mindset stuff. And I think mindset is such a big part of business. And particularly as an introvert, you need to have often those mindset shifts to be able to put yourself out there and, promote your business and do all the things. And so I think any book around mindset is great, but I really love that one.
I love that one. It's been recommended a lot of times. A couple of her books have, because I think they're so, I'm going to say easy to read. Not that we need it to be dumbed down, but they're very easily digestible. And, it makes it kind of enjoyable to take on the information.
Yeah, definitely.
Love that one. Thank you. And lastly, what is the biggest mindset shift you have had to embrace or take on in order to get to where you are today in business?
I think definitely starting to get myself more visible was the thing that made the biggest change for me in my business, and the mindset shift that I needed to do that because I am more of an introvert and because it didn't ever come naturally to me was to really come back to my why and focus on why am I doing this in the first place. And so when you get those feelings of it feels uncomfortable to put myself out there, and like you were saying right at the start about the idea of like being in the spotlight and everyone looking at us and being, hey, look at me, because it doesn't come naturally. For me, it was like, okay, I have two main reasons why I'm doing this. One is because I want to make a positive impact in the world and I want to do something where I feel like I'm really making a difference and helping people. And so I want to be able to reach more of the people that I'm here to serve. And having that mindset shift around visibility helps me to reach more of those people. And even if it's just like that one person that you get to impact and, you touch their lives, like it's worth it. And then the second thing is because I want a business that supports me and provides for my family. And so knowing that when I get visible, like I always say to my clients, if you get featured in the press, you can't predict what will happen. I've had clients where one client had 1,500 new leads from one article.
Wow.
But you can't predict what will happen. So I always say, if you get featured in the press, it's always working in your favor. Like something good is going to come out of it. And sometimes it will be new leads, new clients, new opportunities. Sometimes it leads to like speaking gigs and book deals and all these different things that can happen. So knowing that if you have that mindset shift around visibility, you get to have a positive impact in the world and help more of the people you are here to help, and you get to grow your business.
I love it. I'm going to pop all of your links in the show notes for people to connect with you, but just quickly, where's the best place that they can come and find you?
The website is dinabehrman.com, and across social media, it's just look for Dina Behrman.
Perfect. We'll pop all that in. And thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your lovely PR wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ambitious Introvert podcast with me, Emma-Louise Parks. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. As a thank you, one lucky reviewer each month will win a 60-minute one-on-one coaching session with me, where you'll get the clarity and confidence to attract your ideal clients. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to the show, then please do share and help me reach as many fellow ambitious introverts as possible.